Tonight, I wanted to start by reviewing what I covered last week. I had the feeling that it was a fairly difficult subject, emptiness, to discuss, and that maybe there might be some more questions or confusion that I could try to clarify. So I'm going to start out with, do any of you want to hear more of an explanation about emptiness that I went into last week? And I'm not hearing anybody or seeing any sign. Well, then here are a couple of points that I just wanted to go over here. And part of this is that the translator, his English, the words that he uses in English are sometimes different than what other translators would use for the same Tibetan. And this can cause confusion. The first point that I want to make is that he talks about, and I'm talking about the translator translating Thrangu Rinpoche. He talks about an entity. And an entity, you could say it's either a sentient being or it's non-sentient, and then it would be a thing or phenomena and so forth. And whether it be a sentient being or a thing, either one has no permanent, unique, independent self. In Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about no self of the individual, and then no self of other. I have used, and I think I did last week, use the idea of a singing bowl. It's easy to think, well, a singing bowl is a singing bowl. Case closed, that's what it is. But if you look at it, whoever is perceiving the singing bowl has their own idea of what it is. And as I said, if you put water in it and put it on the floor, a dog would think it's something to drink out of. And my parents had brought back a singing bowl from Nepal when they visited, and they thought it was just dandy to put a potted plant in it because it caught the water when they watered the plant. And of course, we see it as a singing bowl. It could be, if you took it to a scrap dealer, they would assess the metallic content and weigh it and then say it's worth so much. Some people might see it as something that you do for relaxation, healing, singing bowl meditation. You can go to YouTube and watch and listen to this, and on and on and on. And then there, of course, would be some humans that would just scratch their head when they saw it. Like, I don't know what this is all about. So it depends on the perceiver. And then if you look at that singing bowl, it's made out of molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, and a lot of these subatomic particles, when they are observed, and they're difficult to observe, behave like particles sometimes, and sometimes they behave like waves. And a wave, like a light wave, has no matter at all. It's just energy. and on and on and on like that. It's the same thing with human beings. We think that we are a certain way. We think that in many the world religions, they talk about a soul. They talk about something there that is permanent, that is unique and independent and so forth. And from the perspective of Buddhism, all of those are missing. It's interesting how often Thrangu Rinpoche uses the word interdependent or dependent. He uses these words a lot in this series of talks. So the idea is who we think we are. It is really a collection of experiences that we have had during our lives, habitual patterns, karma that we have brought with us from previous lives, and so on. And there is going to be, in the chapters that I'm going to cover tonight, the idea of an aggregate. And aggregate means a collection. And so what we think is a solid self is really a collection of various ideas, experiences, and so forth. And quite honestly, we can have very different ideas about ourselves in a fraction of a second. We can become very confident and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden something happens and, oh, that confidence just goes out the window, so to speak. This is what we talked about last week when I was discussing emptiness. And emptiness does not mean that there is nothing there. What it means is that it's not permanent, it's not unique, and it's free of concepts. It's empty of concepts. So things come into being because of causes and conditions. They remain because of causes and conditions, and they cease to be because of causes and conditions. My final example of emptiness is a dictionary. And if you want to know the meaning of a word, you go to the dictionary, and the meaning of a word is given using other words. And to get a true meaning of the word that you are trying to understand, you might have to look up the meaning of some of the other words that are used to describe that word that you're curious about. So all the words that are used in the dictionary are in the dictionary. There are not words that have an ultimate meaning beyond the dictionary. So it's all interdependent rather than independent or permanent. So permanence, or how impermanent words are. In 1992, I began training for a 3-year retreat, and I started having very little contact with the outside world. And then the retreat began January of 93. And then I got out in the end of May or the retreat ended. That's a better way to put that. The retreat ended, and then I left. And suddenly there was the word menu. You made a phone call and you got a menu if you called a business. There was the internet and you would get a menu. And when I went in, a menu was what you got at a restaurant. So words, the meaning changes over time. And the meaning is not something that is beyond other words. There is no word, to the best of my knowledge, that has a meaning that is beyond the dictionary. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that is kind of my introduction to the material we covered last week. So today I am going to continue talking about Essential Practice by Thrangu Rinpoche, and I'm going to cover chapter 5, Insight, and then the next chapter. So this chapter on insight, needless to say, it's talking about emptiness, and we need to meditate on the meaning of emptiness. And the reason why we do this is because we are confused. We think that whatever arises within us has something more solid and permanent, the way we respond to it. And it causes all kinds of problems. But understanding emptiness in its fullest is the remedy for our bewilderment, our desire, our hatred, our pride, our envy, and all these things cause suffering, and they are obstacles to liberation from samsara. Now, another metaphor that is used is they talk about uprooting these afflictive states of mind, and it is this metaphor of a plant that you do not want to be growing anymore. And if you just pull the top of the plant off, but the roots remain in the ground, the plant will sprout and continue to grow. And it is that way with our negative qualities and our confusion. So we have to uproot them, meaning like you would with a weed, you dig up them at the root and they will not grow anymore. So we have to uproot our negative tendencies, our habitual patterns that are negative, and all of our afflictive states of mind. So knowing that these things have no inherent existence, again, that's another way of saying that they are empty, that this is a very good way to uproot them. It's also very difficult to understand this at the deep level that we need to be able to really understand these. But this is possible, and that is where this book is going, where Thrangu Rinpoche is going. He says that we have to understand that the forms that we see are emptiness, and therefore they lack inherent existence, or this is one of the awkward words the translator uses, inherent establishment, but it means existence, that they lack inherent conceptual establishment and so forth, that they're not permanent, they're not unique, they're not independent, and that we project these things onto outer phenomena as well as other people. And so to do this, to really understand emptiness at a very deep level, we have to abandon doubts. if we don't abandon doubts, will not come to a certainty about emptiness. We have to go beyond wondering, is this true? Is it not true? Is it established? Maybe it's established, maybe it isn't. So we have to abandon doubt, and in order to do that, we have to have this meditative stability that we attain through meditation, and then we have to have knowledge. And the knowledge is, how do we correctly investigate and analyze an object? So here is a quote: if meditative stabilization and knowledge are present, we can leave doubt behind and certainty can be born. And he gives a number of examples here for this. And some of these are very common examples. The first is mistaking a rope for a snake. With the proper knowledge and investigation, we can see that this imaginary snake is actually a rope. And when we see that, then the fear of a snake is gone. The next one is the comparison of our mental afflictions, these afflictive states of mind, as being compared to a physical illness. This physical illness, a doctor could cure you by actually doing some type of surgery with a knife, hopefully a sharp knife. And so the idea is that having achieved stability of our mind through meditation, knowledge takes hold of this metaphorical knife, grips it firmly, and then carefully performs surgery on your mind and removes the illness. I will have to say, I'm assuming that this is an old metaphor, but I don't know, maybe it's something that has just come into the Tibetan tradition with modern Western medicine. Well, let's put it this way. I would be a little bit adverse to having a traditional Tibetan doctor perform this kind of surgery on me a century or two ago. But that's my own opinion. So going on here, the next is the sun. And when the sun shines, darkness is automatically eliminated. So when we see things clearly, when we see the way reality is, then ignorance and the afflictions just vanish like that. Nothing else has to be done. They just are gone. And they will not rise again because you can't be confused again. You've seen the way things are and you can't unsee them. So this would completely uproot all of our confusion, what is causing obscurations and obstacles and so forth. So seeing, and this is a metaphorical seeing, maybe experience is a better way. Experiencing emptiness is the ultimate wisdom, that there's nothing beyond that. That's why it's the ultimate. So when you realize things to be empty, then They realize that they lack being unique, they lack independence, that they're made of parts, and so forth. And you have this very, very profound understanding. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said this one time, that having that experience is like a person that can't speak, tasting sugar, that person knows that he or she is tasting sugar, but since they can't speak, they can't say anything about it. So when you have this ultimate experience of emptiness, since it is beyond words and beyond conception, you really can't say anything about it. So he goes on here, Thrangu Rinpoche goes on to say that there is a problem here, and that is if you conceive, and this is conceptual, that emptiness is non-existence. The problem with this is, in order to have non-existence, you have to have something to compare it with, which would be existence. So you're comparing things here, and that's not true ultimate emptiness. It's still very dualistic. There are two obscurations or obstructions, that's the word he uses here, that have to be abandoned when you realize this ultimate emptiness. The first is the afflictive obstructions, and they are desire, hatred, bewilderment, pride, and so forth. And the other is obstructions to omniscience. And this is very simply confusion, not understanding that things are empty, that everything is empty. If we don't understand that, and I want to stress this, that when he's talking about empty, it means, in a way, it's full of possibility. That empty is just empty of being permanent. Impermanence is, you might say, a quality of emptiness. And so because of impermanence, anything could arise. So this is very, very important. Because of impermanence and emptiness, anything could arise. So we need a remedy for this confusion. And it's an active confusion, and it's duality. It's saying that I am different from you. I remember reading this a long, long time ago in a book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, that this confusion, it's like a grain of sand on a vast sandy beach. It sticks his head up as if a grain of sand head ahead, looks around and says, I'm different. Even though there are billions of grains of sand on this beach, this particular grain of sand thinks that it's different and it doesn't fit in. Well, samsara is full of billions of grains of sand that think that they are different, that they are separate, they're permanent, and on and on and on. And so the remedy for this is to, again, develop calm abiding, being able to rest in that, and then have pure insight. This leads to pure knowledge. And this pure knowledge leads to abandoning these two obstructions that I talked about, the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. Now, the next point is very interesting, I think, and that is that there is the analytical meditation of the scholar and the placement meditation of a simple person. Now, usually the term that is used is yogi, not simple person. Simple person can be a little bit confusing, like, someone that's just a little step above the court jester that doesn't really understand much of anything. But we're talking about a yogi, simple in that respect. Now, in the treatise by Kamalashila, he does not talk about this placement meditation of a simple person, but it's a very large part of the Kagyu tradition and also the Nyingma tradition. And since this is an important part of the Kagyu tradition, Thrangu Rinpoche talks about it. This investigation that needs to be done, this analytical meditation, has to be done, and as it is done, certainty arises. And then from that, knowledge arises. So this is kind of a review what I've gone through already. So with that as a basis, we meditate, and as a result of that, come to accurate, authentic knowledge. And this is the analytical meditation of a scholar. And the Kagyus have a shorter path, and that is this analytical meditation of a yogi or a simple person. And I have heard a number of teachers who would come to KTD or would come into the retreat that I did, people like Tai Situ Rinpoche, and they would say that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was both a scholar and a yogi, indicating that he was familiar with both. Khenpo is an indication that he has achieved the highest degree of study in the Kagyu lineage. But also he spent a very long time in meditation, solitary meditation. And that's where the yogic part comes from. The thing about the analytical meditation of a simple person or yogi is that it's quick. It's a short path. You can reach fruition much more quickly than you would through scholarship. I think this is a good way to show the difference of these two. Now, I was in the first 3-year retreat. There have been many others since then. It's my understanding that it used to be you would ask Rinpoche if you could be in the next retreat or be in a 3-year retreat, and he would say yes or no. But it wouldn't necessarily be based on how long you have been practicing Buddhism or how far along the path you are. Whereas in the Galupa tradition, and the Galupas are known for scholarship, you have to study for 12 years before you can apply for a 3-year retreat. There was one man in my retreat. He had gotten into Hindu yoga through, I think it would be called macrobiotic eating. And he had attained the level of Swami. He's a Westerner. He's from Canada, actually. And a friend of his recommended that he meet Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And the story that I heard was that he showed up at KTD one day with his Swami robes on and had an interview with Rinpoche. And I think by the end of the interview, he asked Rinpoche if he could be in the 3-year retreat, and he wasn't even a Buddhist. And Rinpoche said, well, yes, but you have to da, 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 da. And well, I think he went back to Nepal and received teachings, took refuge, and went into retreat to complete what needed to be done to do a 3-year retreat. And he completed the 3-year retreat. That is a difference. Now, to do this analytical meditation of a simple person, this is not mentioned here specifically, but this is the way I interpret this, that you need to have pointing out instructions by a master who will guide you to recognizing the ultimate nature of your mind. And then having recognized it, that's when you do this analytical meditation. But if you haven't recognized it, how can you meditate on it? So this is a very, very important point here. So in Vajrayana Buddhism, you also have this element of what is called Sutrayana. And Vajrayana is a quicker path than the Sutrayana. They're both Mahayana. That's an important point. They're both motivated to attain the goal for the benefit of both oneself and for all sentient beings. But the Vajrayana path is quicker. Kamalashila explained, quote, we must without fail study, know them, and ascertain the stages of meditation. So that ends the 5th chapter. Now I'm going to go to the 6th chapter. The 6th chapter is certainty. As he begins all his talks, this chapter also begins saying that we need to develop the intention or the motivation to attain supreme awakening for the benefit of all beings. With that, he talks about insight meditation, and this is about the way in which we meditate. And one is meditating on the teachings that external things are not established, meaning empty. Teachings that the internal mind is not established also. And then the third is the realization of those as emptiness. And then this is kind of going over what the last chapter talked about. And so he mentions 3 things to abandon: these afflictive obscurations, the obscurations to omniscience, and then doubt. So when we look at things as being solid, unique, and unchanging, it makes it very difficult. It makes it impossible. How are you going to change if things are unchanging? If there's something inside of you that is permanent and can't change. But if we can look at emptiness, then that corrects this misunderstanding. And actually, it makes it quite possible to change in many, many, many different ways. Again, the analogy that he uses is the sun and the clouds. And here he talks about the sun being freed from the clouds. When the sun is freed from the clouds, it's bright, it's clear, and then the same thing with these obstructions. When they are abandoned, our wisdom becomes clear and bright. And now here, he's talking about the wisdom dawning from the yogic perspective. And the term is yogic direct perception. This wisdom is not based on speculation. It's not inferred. It is that you directly experience it. And because of that, it's extremely clear, it's extremely powerful. And this removes these obstructions, the afflictive obstruction and the obstruction to omniscience, that they are eliminated and eliminated instantly. This direct perception sees things as they appear and also how they are. So it isn't like appearances disappear. It's just that you see that they appear in a manner that is untrue. So appearances do not go away, but you realize that they are not permanent. There is not somehow or another an other, whether it be a tree, a car, a road, or whatever, a screen on your digital device, that all of this is just appearance, mere appearance. And then there is the ultimate, which is beyond description, beyond conception, and so on and so forth. So this is why a Buddha is called all-knowing, because he knows both the way things appear and the way things are. At this point, you, quote, part with mistakes. You do not fall into the trap of thinking that the relative appearances are real, solid, and so forth. And he says that's like the sun being free from the clouds, and that the wisdom knows the variety of beings and things and so forth. So next, he talks about the realization of the mode of abiding of beings, because, well, we have the 6 realms. You have full God, you have the jealous God, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. And within the human realm, this should be very obvious today after yesterday being inauguration. And you had Biden pardoning all these people, and then Trump comes in and pardons all these other people, that there's more than one way of abiding in the human realm. He then talks about how this idea of having this view and practice of meditation, realizing the mode of abiding, separation of the two obstructions, and then this wisdom that knows all, or omniscience, that these are not present in many non-Buddhist paths, and that even in the Buddhist path, that the hearers and solitary realizers do not have this. They don't understand, or they do not have this idea of no self, of other. The fruition of the path of listeners and hearers is that of a full destroyer, that they have conquered this idea of having a permanent self, but other still has a self. So there still is something to conquer from their point of view. So that is one level in Buddhism that is a far, far different place than what is being talked about in this treatise here. And then he talks about the mind-only school. And we talked about this briefly in our last book class, and that is all phenomena and all the realms of samsara are mind-only, but this does not explain things fully and completely. So it's necessary to realize that mind too has, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, but has no limit and does not have a middle. There's not a limit to it, and there's not a middle, because both are comparisons. If there's a limit to mind, then what's limiting it? And if there's a middle, what's not the middle? That these are concepts, they're conceptual. And if there is a limit, then when you reach that limit, what happens to mind? Does it disappear? Does it fall apart? Does it need to go to a therapist? You could say birth is a limit. And then between birth and death, there's no abiding. There's no middle. So this is to counteract this idea that you have birth, you have death, and then you have a middle, that mind is beyond beginning. The Buddha talked about the beginningless beginning and the endless end. So there's no beginning, there's no middle, there's no end, and so forth. The next thing here that I'm going to touch on is the ultimate truth and conventional. He uses the word appearances. Frequently, it's conventional truth, but here it's appearances. So ultimate truth is that all phenomena are emptiness, and there is no one that sees and no not seeing and no seeing. It's beyond all of this, which is conceptual. And then conventional appearances, we can talk about, well, I saw someone, or that person did something or said something, but there is no self in the conventional, these designations. This is not mentioned here, but I like what Trunggu Rinpoche uses, which is a functional self, that an enlightened being knows how samsara works. An enlightened being realize that people behave like they do have a self. They can navigate within this world. My favorite kind of, I don't know, I guess you'd call it a joke, is can a enlightened being that has realized no self use a self-service gas pump? And of course they can, but they realize there's not a self there that is operating the gas pump. So from the ultimate perspective, phenomena is not established and it can't be described. It can't be conceptualized. It is, quote, simply true. So you don't achieve the fruit. You realize the fruit. You realize it, but you don't achieve it. Again, I remember the story that Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche talked about the boy that told his mother, and this would have happened in old Tibet, I want to meet my father. And so the mother said, well, we need to, this will be a long walk today. We need to pack some food and provisions and prepare. So they did that. Went into the kitchen, got everything prepared, then walked out the kitchen door and then started walking. And this is Tibet, and walking up mountains and down mountains, through mountain passes, through valleys. And after walking all day long, they come to this pass and they look down, and there is this house. And the mother says, your father's in the house. So they walk down the mountain, go in the front door of the house, and there is his father. And the boy is delighted to see his father. And there's a joyful reunion. Then the mother said, well, it's time for us to go in the kitchen and make tea for everybody. So the boy followed his mother into the kitchen, and of course it was the same room that they left from. So yeah, you're not gaining anything, but suddenly you're realizing, oh, this has been there all this whole time. Again, this can be realized through the path of a ordinary person or a yogi or a yogini, or else a scholar. But through the path of an ordinary being, it's much quicker. It also means that you have to do a lot of abandoning quickly. So let's see, to go on here, he talks about there is the conventionally false, and then there is what is just plain false. And he talks about the horns of a rabbit being false. A rabbit appearing is part of conventional reality, but seeing a rabbit with horns is absolutely false. So this is an important distinction to make. He again says, from the context of the ultimate, what appears conventionally is not true. And that they are like illusions, reflections, and echoes, and so forth. Now, he finishes up this chapter by talking about the process of dependent relationships and the 12 branches or links of dependent relationships. And this is a process. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. So the first is ignorance. And this means not knowing. that we do not know the truth about reality, that we're mistaken. We separate into self and other. We introduce dualistic thinking. And then as a result of that, well, we've got cyclic existence. So ignorance is the root of all of these misleading appearances of samsara. The second link is conditioned action. He makes this comparison that conditioned actions is like accomplishing work. We accomplish the work of ignorance. We keep doing things based on ignorance, and then we accumulate all kinds of virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma. And then these are the causes for our next life, whether it be in the God realm, the human realm, the jealous God realm, the hungry ghost realm, the hell realm, and so forth. We're accumulating the causes for where we are going to be reborn in our next life. The next is consciousness. So these are predispositions. I like to use the term habitual patterns. He does not use that, but I think this helps explain it. We condition our consciousness with habitual patterns about seeing things a certain way. These predispositions, these habitual patterns, will later on have a very strong influence on our lives. The next is name and form. And this actually is the beginning of our next life. You could look at these 12 links as actually including 3 lives. I just covered life number 1. Now we're going into life number 2. And so name and form is the beginning of life number 2. So form is just a collection of things that cause birth in a womb. That now you have a new body inside a womb. You haven't been born yet. And it's because of craving. And it's because of, he uses the term aggregate. And I thought it would be good to look up the definition of aggregate in the dictionary, which will kind of help give you an idea of what he's talking about here. And here are words that came up in the dictionary: collection, mass, cluster, lump, clump, pile, heap. Some of these words are used to translate aggregate. And then I got a smile out of this. It had informal, a mixed bag. So you want to use that, fine too. I wouldn't say that in a formal teaching setting. But the idea is at this point, we're still in the womb. We don't have our senses fully developed. We're not having a lot of experience other than what you're getting through your mother. So then the next link is the sense fields arise. Eyes, ear, nose, tongues, body. You're born. Now you're in the world and you're getting input from your sense organs. The next is contact. And so you're having contact with outer objects through your sense organs. You hear sounds, you smell fragrances. Maybe fragrance is a better word than smells. Depends on where you are. The next one is feeling. You can have good feelings by the sensory input. You can have bad feelings. And it's interesting how what one person feels is a good feeling, another person might feel is a bad feeling, or feel that it doesn't matter. So all of this is individual. The next is craving. So we experience good feelings, we want more of it. We, in fact, might think, I need that. And then if we have a bad feeling, we develop a craving for getting away from it or destroying it in some way or another. 9 is grasping. So here it gets more intense about I want more of it. It's like I must have more of it. I have to do whatever I can to have more of that or destroy that or get away from that and so forth. Number 10 is existence. This is referring to now over a lifetime that we have accumulated a huge amount of karma in our minds. And again, a very strong form of karma is our habitual patterns and our mental conditioning. And all this will affect our next life. Link number 11 is birth. And this is the third life in these 12 links. And this is the same as link number 5. And then link number 12 is aging and death. And well, at death, then you're right back to link number 1, which was ignorance. And around the wheel you go. Now, I have something that I want to share with you. Here is the wheel of life. The 12 links, if you can see at the very top, this is the first one, ignorance, goes all the way around the circle. The 12th one is old age and death. So this is ignorance, a blind man with a cane. Again, I have written here, ignorance, the root of samsara, don't know the truth about reality, cyclic existence arises. Then over here is conditioned actions, or formation is another word that is frequently used. So you've got a potter. So because of karma resulting from ignorance, we are shaping who we are and where we are going. The next is consciousness. And so here it's a monkey picking fruit. This is the fruition of karma. And then name and form, well, here you have a Tibetan, I can't recall the name of that particular type of boat, but you're being ferried from one lifetime to the next. That is name and form, the development of self, the beginning of a new life based on karma. Then the 5 perceptual entrances, you have this large, by Tibetan standards, a prosperous house. And the windows are the perceptual entrances, our sense organs. It's an empty building, so that is these 5 perceptual entrances. Then here we have contact with the sense organs and an object of consciousness, and you have a man and a woman touching each other. Then feelings or sensation. Here you have a person, it looks like he's sticking his finger in his eye. The idea is that the eye is very sensitive. Frequently there is actually an arrow stuck in the person's eye or a stick. But the idea is this is a very sensitive part of the body. So you have either pleasant, unpleasant, or indifferent sensations. Then the next here is craving. Well, it's a man and a woman partying. So you want to continue the pleasant situations, you want to avoid or ignore unpleasant ones. And then 9 is desire, grasping, involvement, attachment. Again, it depends on how the translator wants to translate the Tibetan word. It isn't that there are lots of different Tibetan words. So here it gets to be an addiction. And you can see here the man has gotten 3 large baskets full of fruit, collecting them. So that is desire and grasping and attachment. Now, existence or becoming is, well, here we have a man and a woman in bed. So all the karma necessary for rebirth has been accumulated. And then 11 birth is you actually have a woman giving birth. And then the last one, death, old age and death, is here you have a man. In his back is a corpse that is all wrapped up. And he's taking it to a charnel ground where you can see there's a corpse there already with vultures eating it. This is how life ends, and now he's on to the next life. So there is a little pictorial of these 12 links.